Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host, and Daniel, it's good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine. And
good.
There are a lot of things going on, but no earthquakes, we hope. Let's try to prevent them, but things were going on at the G20 meeting, and all I can tell you is not a whole lot of fireworks there.
Yeah.
And I guess the biggest surprise came afterwards when Trump, let's go visit my old buddy. We're friends now. I think I'd go there. I think I'd like to go to North Korea. And that sort of stumped his staff a little bit. No plans. It takes months to plan these things. It was interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit. But Daniel, before we get into that, I'd like to just mention a loss of a good friend of ours, and that's Justin Raimondo. He's started anti-war and is very, very successful. And we have to admit, we relied on him a whole lot. Yeah. They looked at a lot of things we couldn't possibly look at, and they could get summaries out there. So looking at anti-war for a program like that was very valuable. But Justin, I've known him for years, and he was very, very dedicated to the anti-war movement. And he's died at a young age, had cancer, and it's a serious loss for all of us, but especially for the libertarian anti-war movement, because he had done such a good job.
Yeah, he was great for the movement, but great for me personally. I discovered Justin in the early days of the internet, the early days of the World Wide Web. When I was still a little bit confused, I didn't like our foreign policy because I thought we were supporting the wrong people. Then I started reading Justin, and I realized we shouldn't support anybody, that the only answer is non-interventionism. And I discovered some guys called Lou Rockwell and Ron Paul, and they were saying the same thing. And I thought, now it finally makes sense. And so I've known Justin since probably 98 or 99, and he did unbelievable work during the Balkan Wars, almost every day, hourly writing. A huge influence on my life. I fought with him. We fought like cats and dogs over these last 20 years. But, I called him, thankfully, when he was ill, but not too ill to talk. And I said, hey, Justin, I'm sorry we fought so much. He said, it's no big deal. It's nothing. So very sad, very sad.
Yeah, it sure is. But life goes on, and we'd like more lives to continue, and we'd like to have less war, and that's exactly what Justin stood for.
Yeah.
But we do want to talk a little bit of the significance of this meeting at the DMZ. And I have to say, I was at the DMZ once, in the Air Force. We went up there, but it wasn't on a peace mission. I was in a materials command, and we were hauling around nuclear weapons and visiting bases there, but right up to the DMZ. But that would have been in the early 60s, so it was still a pretty hot time, and the Korean War was well remembered. So this is a big thing, and we've encouraged Trump. I mean, he had an opening to North Korea, and it seemed to be going well. And then they were getting ready to really sign a treaty and move forward. And then that fellow called Bolton, all of a sudden he arrives and says, no way, Mr. President, you can't do this. And he puts a monkey wrench in it, and Trump's back off on it. Yeah. So, and it's been in the doldrums, except Trump in the last several months have said more favorable things, so it's not a complete surprise, but it's interesting. But, it looks like that Bolton might not be around to put a monkey wrench in this one like he did last time. I think he's out of town. I think he's someplace off like Mongolia or someplace. That's sort of interesting.
I think we even may have said on the show that, if you're going to meet him again, don't let Bolton anywhere near us. So maybe he listened to watch. But it is a good sign that Bolton wasn't there throwing monkey wrenches in it. What's amazing, President Trump spontaneously, as we understand it, spontaneous means it didn't take years of preparation, decides, hey, well, I'm over here in Asia, maybe I'll stop in and see Kim. He does something that's absolutely historic, the first American president to set foot in North Korean territory. It's a symbolic move. It was a symbolic step. We even have a picture of it. I'm sure everyone has already seen this step, but a symbolic step into foreign territory, into North Korean territory, and then about an hour of talks in a room there. Any other president, for example, Obama, you can imagine, this is a breakthrough, this is historic, this is amazing. With Trump, it was roundly criticized by literally everyone, not only among the Democrats, the media, a lot of right-wingers, a lot of Republicans. Everyone hates this idea.
It's not exactly the same thing of what was going on in the election of 1952. when Eisenhower was elected. But I remember the election. I'd be listening to the radio and delivered newspapers, so I was reading the news and this sort of thing. But the promise of Eisenhower, which I think made the whole difference, he says, if elected, I'll go to Korea. That was just sort of his mantra, and he did, and he went to Korea. So this one wasn't advertised, but this is a president going to Korea, and at least the step in the right direction was made by Eisenhower. At least the killing stopped, and the DMZ was created, and a sort of a peace came, but we're technically still at war. So I think it's time, that there's a peace treaty, there's a signature that the two sides come together. I was interested in seeing any comments from South Korea, and there was one by the president. It seemed like he had mixed feelings about, was hoping for the best, but it wasn't like, well, we're home free now.
Yeah.
So because he probably wasn't even briefed on this very much, but this might, I'm sure that he represents, because of the election that he had, that was one of the issues, that he wanted to open the doors a little bit with North Korea. Of course, my argument, and I'm sure you agree, that there's a problem over there. Why don't we just let them sort it out, and get as many foreigners out of there as possible? But, over all those years and all those sanctions and all the money we've spent since the early 1950s, really didn't bring about peace. So this may be a move in the right direction, but there may be some other things going on too that might be a pretty important area.
That's true, and the response has just been insane, though. By meeting Kim, Trump has, quote, raised the profile of a dictator. Think about that mentality. You mentioned Eisenhower a minute ago. What about when he met with Khrushchev? May have averted a war. What about when Nixon met with Mao Zedong, a guy with the blood of millions of people on his hands? It was worth that to make the opening. What about Reagan and Gorbachev? Gorbachev was a more liberal leader. He still represented a pretty evil empire when it comes to this. Is such an insane idea. That by meeting with him, trying to go down a path of diplomacy and away from war, you're somehow giving him legitimacy. What does that even mean?
And what if Kennedy was unwilling to meet with Khrushchev in the midst of the Cuban crisis?
Exactly.
I remember that well, because that was the day I lost some of my liberties. Because before that year was out, I was in a uniform. But anyway, I was certainly glad at that time that things had settled down, and there wasn't going to, because the troops were being, and the Navy was all ready to go into Cuba.
Yeah, very close.
Anyway, it was over. So yes, the meetings make sense. Sometimes you can do it with some common sense. I was always disturbed looking at this as a younger person about with Stalin.
Yeah.
I never liked that because he was really a bad guy, and I'm even today I'm not sure that alliance helped end World War II, and if it did, it introduced the Cold War. So this doesn't mean these people have complaints, but they're more hysterical, they're more political, they're not looking at it in a broader way of diplomacy, because it is true that to whom would we talk to if it was that we have to talk to purity, people who have never committed? We couldn't even talk to ourselves. We wouldn't be allowed to, because we have a long way to go. But of course, that's my argument. We ought to clean up our act before we think that we can be the model for the rest of the world.
And let's kind of browse a little bit on the what people are tweeting about. Here's a couple of tweets. Virtually every Democratic candidate for the presidency completely trashed this idea of a meeting, except for this fellow Andrew Yang, who had a tweet, hey, anything that moves us toward peace. Other than that, unfortunately, even some people we like, let's put up a couple of these tweets, these people we don't like very much. Here's Elizabeth Warren. Our president shouldn't be squandering American influence on photo ops and exchanging love letters with a ruthless dictator. Tell me that's a serious person, It's so absurd and ridiculous. We should be dealing with principled diplomacy. It's incredible. And I think we have a previous one. Here's the great Joe Biden. President Trump's coddling of dictators at the expense of American national security and interests. He sits down with the guy, meets with him, and talks for an hour, and he's coddling dictators. They're just trying to sound tough. And in fact, it's pretty disgusting because they're playing politics with actual national security issues. It shows how completely unserious they are. These are serious issues. They're trying to score political points off of them.
What if the news carried some of the advice that we talk about to soften that position that you're talking about? Is it true that the United States sometimes had a president that would make kill lists and and even murder American citizens?
Exactly.
Has anybody suffered from the infractions of civil liberties in this country? How do they treat their whistleblowers that are telling the truth about what's going on? And what about the wars of aggression that have been going on now for decades? And how many people have died over that? Even the Korean War, we got in that in an unconstitutional fashion. There was no declaration of war. Even Robert Taft was opposed to what we were doing back then,
Yes.
because it wasn't a constitutional war. So this is, but when an individual like myself says this, or you say it, what they want to do is say, you're a bad guy.
Yeah.
You don't care about America. You're unpatriotic. You don't believe in our military, this sort of thing. But I think, though, that you do not have to accept the monstrosities of people before you talk to them, especially in the affairs of the world, because sometimes they change and sometimes it's demagoguery, that goes on, that we don't know the truth. Right now, Kim is, a lot of accusations are made. And what about Assad? He gas his own people.
Yeah.
He's probably a dictator we wouldn't like. But they use the extreme because it doesn't fit the scenario they want. And Saddam Hussein, not such a guy, not such a good guy, but we were his ally when we said go fight the Iranians, and he went to war for it. So people just don't want to listen to the truth because it mixes their political system up. And what you're reading there is political stuff.
Yeah.
And one thing, and I've mentioned this, so the biggest inconsistency is back in the old days when the Russians were the Soviets and very, very aggressive and very, very dangerous. These people in this same party, and even some people who are still living, they were all for doing whatever they can, to get along with the Soviets.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's a different story, and they're using it for political reason. That's why I think the American people are still with those who will talk about the possibility of peace without giving up anything that is American and emphasizing what is great about America and why personal liberty is something worthwhile, but that doesn't mean that you can't talk to people.
Yeah, and you talk about past unacceptable behavior and these sorts of things. Well, the question is, how do you get them to change this kind of behavior? And they would say, what is their answer? How do you get, if you believe that North Korea behaves terribly, the leaders are terrible, well, the old ways obviously don't work. We've been doing it, as you point out, since you were a kid watching it on TV. We've been doing the same thing: sanction, pressure, sanction. Maybe if we take a different course and do something like what Trump is doing, something like real diplomacy, something like just opening up and letting them do business with us, maybe that's a better way to have them change their behavior.
Since I haven't heard the perfect explanation of understanding the foreign policy that we're following, because we're not even sure the president has a precise policy that he's following.
That's true.
But that's a different subject. But sometimes I'm a suspicious person at times. I've been in Washington, and there's reason to be skeptical. My skepticism on this is, we've been essentially favorable on this. Why not talk to him? And he should have right to. And the Democrats are wrong by condemning all this. But I have gotten to the point when something is big news over here. What are they doing over here? And right now, I think the language being used in the Middle East, what's going on against Iran, it's been there for a long time. It's very consistent. There's more involvement, and Israel's involved. And just yesterday, Israel was bombing Iranian places up in Syria. And it goes on and on. But they have peace treaties that they're trying to work out, and they're getting pretty caustic. There are some now in the business of working out a peace treaty on our side as well, that the Palestinians don't exist. Remember during the debates they brought up, who believes that there's such a thing as the Palestinian people? And so, no, they don't exist. They're not people. Well, there are a few people call themselves Palestinians. But all this to me seems to be getting worse. And when you look at the obsession that we have with Saudi Arabia, and Trump is works that into his trade policy. Well, during all this time where he's gotten criticism, the Crown Prince, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
And he says he's fantastic. Saw him at G20 and praised him for being such a fantastic person. I think I might have not kicked him in the shins or anything, but to call him something spectacular, I think that he was doing a spectacular job.
He's good with a knife.
So there's a lot of room for refinement and improvement in diplomacy, but it has to start off with a philosophical principle, maybe endorsing the Constitution and the implied foreign policy of non-interventionism and a goal of seeking peace could guide somebody's foreign policy. But unfortunately, we hear bits and pieces, and people have parts of that philosophy, but there's always except for, oh yeah, that's okay for here, but we don't want to do it over here instead of a basic principle.
Yeah, you kind of threw some cold water on our enthusiasm for this. But you're right. When they're doing this over here, what are they not doing over there? And the idea that you're going to give the Palestinians a few bucks to pretend they don't exist, I don't think that's going to fly. But I'm going to close by making an announcement, actually, and that is we've just put live our announcement of a new program at the Ron Paul Institute, the Ron Paul Scholars Seminar. It'll take place on August 23rd. The day before our big conference in Washington, D.C. It will be in Washington, D.C., and this is a pilot project. 10 lucky scholars will sit through an all-day seminar with some very good people, some experts, a couple of professors, talking about the national security state versus a foreign policy of peace. If you go to our website, you'll see up on the top right-hand the announcement. I'm going to send out something to all of our subscribers. Go to ronpaulinstitute.org and subscribe to our updates. I will go ahead and send that out, but we're looking for some bright young students who are interested in the things that Dr. Paul has been doing and that we're doing on the show. Come join us. These are upper division undergrads and graduate students. So we're looking for older students here because it's a really independent study program, but it's very exciting, great lecturers. We'll be talking a little bit more about this with Dr. Paul, but I want to get the announcement out right away because we have to move quickly. We've been putting all the moving parts together. We finally got it where it's going to work, but we got to move quickly. So have a look at it on our website. And Dr. Paul, I'm really excited about this project.
Very, very good. And I made sure I did put it on my calendar, so I'm going to be there. But no, it's been working out well to have these conferences. They're very popular. A lot of young people come. But the other thing at these conferences, Daniel, that always impressed me was people come long distances too. We have support. So this message of liberty and peace, it's not a colloquial. It's not just for people in certain states or certain mentality. I mean, it's a worldwide thing that's been known throughout all of history, and that's why it's very attractive to a lot of people around the world, and that's why they do tune into this program. We appreciate that. But I think this whole thing is fascinating because I think what's happened with Kim and Trump talking to each other, I think this is very good. But we also express the concerns and the downside of this, that somebody's going to come along and it might change again. But as anything that's moving in a direction, I like an all or nothing program, total non-intervention, this sort of thing, which is, very idealistic and it's not going to happen overnight. But anything that will move us in a direction, I'm supportive of. If you move in less intervention, more pro-peace, more understanding of what defense means versus militarism, I'm always going to support that, recognizing there are so many imperfections. But there's no reason not to be proud of the principles of total non-interventionism, non-violence, no aggression, whether it's by individuals or whether it's in economics or whether it's in foreign policy. I am absolutely convinced if we could get the world, the individuals of the world, to understand and actually practice that principle, we'd be living in a very much different world, and it would be much more prosperous, and it would be one that I think we could all enjoy a lot more. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.